Children of the Iteru. Prologue. The Dark Time. That is all that needs be said to conjure an instance filled with a floating dread. Never mention the beasts by name, for their name is a curse. 300 years since it began, yet buried trauma has not relinquished the collective heart. It is in fact a wound scarcely lanced. They were unknown for the most part, strange and foreign, those lands surrounding the great green sea. A shield of fatal desert and deep, devouring waters kept Kemet safe, impregnable. Part-time groups of conscripted farming men, largely made up of farming boys, with limited organized training and often led by inexperienced officers. This is what made up the mighty Kemet army. Under the standard of the state war god Montu, this solemn force would be called upon to participate in short-interval, usually bloodless skirmishes to quell heated conflict between Kemet nobles, and less often, to conduct punitive campaigns to defend Pharaoh's dusty trading fortresses in occupied Kush. It was a tested, successful, and stable system of defense that maintained a wealthy and most often peaceful country that had endured since before the golden age of pyramid building. In fact, since the time of the Great War of Unification led by the warrior god-king Menes 1400 years earlier. Ma'at, strong and vigilant goddess of order, in eternal defense against chaos. Chaos, manifested in the god Seth, though often beaten back, could never be conquered. He lay ever watchful for the slightest crack through which he could furtively infiltrate the shield of the enemy. Unknown to but one oracular priest and 2 disbelieving court officials, Seth had found a fresh crack into the peaceful order of Kemet. Ma'at was being compromised. Slowly, imperceptibly, she was losing her stronghold. It soon became apparent to most that something was wrong. Royal authority was being increasingly threatened. Princely nobles presiding over various provinces throughout the Lower Kingdom had long ago acquired a surreptitious hunger for increased wealth and power beyond that provided by their royal appointed office. But now a pact had been formed, made up at first of only a few corrupt nobles, but later joined by several who were corruptible. Their goal, to gain power and wealth enough to rival that of Horus on the throne, the divine king, Sobek-hotep IV himself. Violent insurrection was their chosen path, and those sacrilegious rebels were soon backed by an army loyal to a promise of reward beyond possibility. Derisively, they marched under the standard of the cult of Sobek, the crocodile, the patron god of the city of Shedet, the home of their treasonous leader. Yet Sobek was also the eponymous protector of Pharaoh. In truth, it was insidious Seth, god of chaos, in his sometime guise of a crocodile, that gave lethal power to this conurbation of evil. Civil war had come to Kemet, and all her resources were being strained. The king's army, although outnumbering the rebel forces, remained responsible for the integrity of the trading forts in Kush, as well as the day-to-day police maintenance and defense of the ancient capital of Memphis, and those provinces still loyal to the crown, making a swift end to these ruinous hostilities improbable. It took 2 interminable years for Pharaoh's forces to crush the uprising. The rebel leaders were executed, their bodies burned, and their names obliterated from all written record. No chance for continued life after earthly death. All proven followers were scattered throughout Kemet as slaves, many being traded south to the autonomous kingdom of Punt. It was over. Grievous relatives, through sacred ritual and burial, launched the remaining dead into the presence of Osiris, great god of the afterlife. However, the war's effect on the order of Kemet had been dire. The infrastructure of numerous cities and townships had been broken, and the trauma of war left most inhabitants in a state of gloom. This darkness drew a dreadful fever to the country, accompanied by red spots that covered the entire body, water-filled blisters, and death for a third of the sick. Ma'at was slowly regaining her strength, but her return to stability appeared distant. Offering was made to the goddess of truth, immense oblation from the very hands of Pharaoh, but chaos continued to loom everywhere. It was then that they came, a sea of glistening chariots, shadowed by an innumerable army of infantrymen, thundering across the land bridge of the Sinai Peninsula toward Memphis, cutting a swath of catastrophic brutality, death, and destruction. Surprise was a most lethal weapon against an undermanned and still exhausted Kemet army. A strange paralyzing numbness took hold of the people. They had survived and were still struggling to survive so much. Now to be faced with this. Never in the country's history had foreigners penetrated its borders. As the beasts approached the center of the capital city, the destruction abruptly stopped. For these Asiatics feared the deities of Kemet, even as weak as they were, and would not dare defile the great temple of the god Ptah, patron god of Memphis. Just outside the structure's immense sandstone walls, the foreign general turned his army eastward, leaving the temple intact, to resume his unbounded slaughter in a push toward the dazzling royal palace of Sobek-hotep. All attempts to stop the onslaught were thwarted. Nearly 1,000 Kemet soldiers, now in furious battle mode, fell in the face of weapons never before seen in the land of the Nile. The immaculate, hallowed pathway leading to the palace was transformed to a scene of brown bodies, whole and in parts, scattered in the bloody wake of the invaders.
The enemy approached the God King's mansion with drums beating out a wild rhythm of victory. Inside, protected only by the royal court guards, Pharaoh, his family, and a few remaining loyal officials
had retreated to a small audience chamber. The approaching drums beat in their ears as a dirge, a harbinger of dark fates imminent, yet Sobek-hotep and his queen Tentopet showed no fear. The time was too short for such extravagance. They are in the midst of farewells to their two beloved children, the 10-year-old royal prince, heir to the throne, and his younger sister. They will be taken south, where it is hoped that their lives will be spared. For the king and queen, escape will not be attempted. The invasion was too quick. More important to surrender themselves and bring the foreign general to a halt here at Memphis, giving their royal highnesses the best chance of making it to the hopeful safety of the upper Kemet city of Thebes. The couple have only reassuring smiles and calm didactic words for their progeny, who focus intently on their parents' faces, endeavoring to remain oblivious to the oppressive tension that mounts within the room. A moment later, with the blessings of Ra, God of the sun, God of gods, from all who remain, the tearful yet biddable children are gone, accompanied by 2 trusted members of the king's coterie, who will act as caretakers, guides, and protectors unto death. Outside the splendor and sanctuary of the stateroom, the sounds of battle and ululations of death, which up to this point had been blaring, now become deafening, as the outer barriers that protect the tranquility of the palace are penetrated. The beasts move at a quick march, drums thundering, led by their general in the very direction of the refuge of the king, who orders all remaining court officials and guards to depart while they still can.
They reticently obey,
silently passing through the same hidden door through which the previous party had made their escape. Pharaoh and his queen move with equanimity to stand before their royal chairs and await the inevitable. It isn't until the last few seconds that the shock of what is happening can be seen on the faces of their majesties. Yet as the gold-encased double doors of the room are ruptured, Sobek-hotep and Tintopet, with a prayer to Ra, are anchored, immovable. Once inside the entrance, the general and his infantry are struck by a sight that halts their march. War drums fall silent as all stare into a sumptuous room, empty except for two glorious figures positioned before a matching pair of golden jewel-encrusted thrones, on the back of which are magnificently carved representations of the pair similarly dressed as they are now, in full royal regalia. Sobek-hotep, tall and swarthy, wears a tunic of the finest white linen. Around his waist lay a broad belt of gold, inlaid with lapis lazuli and carved with his cartouche-encircled name. Covering his chest is a wide collar of solid gold, and in his hands rest the crook and flail, sacred symbols of sovereignty. On his head sits the double crown, divine emblem of the long-ago joined kingdoms of Lower and Upper Kemet. Tentopet, a dark-skinned, lambent-faced beauty, in a sheer linen-sheathed dress with broad shoulder straps and covered with a fine netting of the richest turquoise. She is crowned with the blessed golden cobra diadem, the uraeus. The general is irresolute what to make of this unexpected scene. Looking past walls painted in a panorama of exquisitely lifelike marshlands populated by geese flying and feeding, he focused on the delicately carved palm tree pillars of red granite that surround him, unaware of their beauty, yet all senses alert, perusing for some sign of ambush, some trick, magic perhaps. He does not see nor sense anything. His eyes rest on the king, then focus on royal coal-lined eyes. Within these eyes lay resignation. Now the general understands. A sacrifice has been offered, a sacrifice to a new and terrorizing god. He speaks, his voice corrosive, in broken Kemet, thick with the accent of his native tongue. Yes, I am Salatus, new god to you and your people. You are for me. I accept sacrifice. He slowly and confidently approaches the unarmed and motionless king and queen, stopping inches away from Sobek-hotep. The air between them becomes a sickening mixture of rancid sweat, raw shad fish, and fragrant mandrake oil. Would there now be fear in the king's brown face? Salatus can find none. Sobek-hotep puts out his hand to Tentopet, who grabs it softly. The general smiles. This is the signal. Khopesh in hand, the curved blade strikes with wild, febrile precision. Blood, warm and enveloping, white linen stained, stone floor flooded in red. Sobek-hotep falls. Tentopet does not speak, heart not quailed. Pulling her beloved's face toward hers, she fills his dying view with her familiar, adoring visage. As the king takes his dying breath, he gives his wife a fervent and grateful smile. Salatus, his feral eyes still full of mad fire, backs a short distance away from the now dead majesty and his grieving widow. He is fully aware that only half his expected sacrifice has been received. With one lifted, red-splattered hand, that full measure of due offering is satisfied, as every soldier who can push his way close enough uses khopesh, club, fist, and foot to eviscerate the queen. That marked the beginning. The dark time was upon us. Salatus and his forces roaming our homeland, engaged in frenzied depredation, had no idea that the chaos brought to this conquered country was not wholly of their doing, but an act of complicity. The ancient enemy of order, Malevolent Seth, strong and vigilant, had won. The invaders founded their own capital, a fortress city, impregnable, in the delta at Avaris. From there, under the tyranny of King Salatis, vile tentacles stretched south to touch every corner of Lower Kemet, where no citizen was spared the degradation of occupation. Thousands were killed, turning the Nile red with their blood. Whole provinces taxed to the brink of starvation, forcing those who were able to resettle in Upper Kemet, where resources dwindled to catastrophic levels. We were, all of us, made little better than slaves to foreigners who not only stole freedom, but culture as well, claiming the history and gods of Kemet as their own. 130 years later found us still under the domination of the occupiers and their patron god Seth. Among their accomplices, hundreds of traitorous natives of Kemet, puppets of Avaris. Their efforts had helped to crush many a rebellion from Upper Kemet. Led by a determined princely family centered at the ancient stronghold of Thebes, city of the god Amun, a growing army of loyal patriots who at first were a mere manageable irritant had lately become a disconcerting threat to the then king of the foreigners, Pepi. The current had gradually begun to shift, and this fact was forefront in the minds of the noble Thebans. Most imperative in their pursuit of victory were weapons, not those native to Kemet, but the devastating weapons of the Asiatics. Their bows were much heavier than those of this country, able to launch an arrow that travels farther and much deeper into the flesh of its target. The khopesh, called a scimitar by the invaders, is a curved, remarkably sharp sword that makes unrecognizable mud out of its victims. Above all is the chariot, a nearly inviolable horse-drawn platform on wheels that easily breaks through serried ranks of infantry, allowing its riders to strike with quick and accurate deadly force. The precise makeup and method of construction of these tools of war had become a brutally guarded secret for over a century. All attempts to crack their magic had failed, and gaining that knowledge was the key. A few of the hated that knew these secrets, master weapons makers, had been captured over the years, but they had sworn to their God that they would give their lives before revealing what was buried within their hearts, and no amount of threat or torture had been able to break that vow. Efforts had been made to simply capture the weapons of Avaris, enough to result in victory for the Loyalists, but that too failed. They were not able to obtain the intact numbers needed to make a substantial difference to the outcome of any battle. The leader of the Theban revolutionaries was a confident black-skinned prince named Kamose, who had recently acquired his position of predominance after the death of his brother at the hands of the beasts. Brave Sekenenra, he had known no fear in the face of a force that, like an infernal Kamzan, proved indomitable, dying in excruciating agony of a crushing battle-axe wound to the skull. He was a boy, with the hands and heart of a seasoned master.
Apprenticed at the unheard-of age of 5.
He had amazed his mentors with his speedy grasp of the intricacies of weapon-making. After only 9 years, he had been proclaimed a master artisan and innovator within the Avaris weapons works. For one of his tender years, this accomplishment was astounding. News of it spread first throughout the delta, then south, to finally reach Thebes and the ears of Kamose. Obsession with the idea of capturing and controlling this youth crept upon the Theban prince like an ingesting cobra, enveloping him completely. Scarce time for other issues. For Kamose this was the most significant, and that boy was the solution. Solemn colloquy with trusted counsel eventually gave birth to a plan. A party of 3 tenacious Theban warriors would make their way north to the delta. Silently sailing by the moon's light would mean slow progress, yet less chance of being detected. Those natives loyal to Pepi were often not apparent, thus contact with anyone would be avoided. Once outside the massive fortified walls of Avaris, the rebels began a course of action now muddled by the passage of time. Legend supports the fierce killing and disfigurement of a young Asiatic fisher boy of similar age and height as the weapons maker. A miraculous kidnapping, and the fisher's body supplants. Exactly how the dauntless three were able to enter the fortress has long been immersed in a sometimes bitter mire of speculation. But whatever the truth, it could only have been through the divine interception of the blessed Hidden One, Amun of Thebes. However, there exists no doubt regarding the truth of this one fact. Kyan, the master weapons maker, was captured and placed under the complete domination of Prince Kamose. At the youthful age of 14 years, it did not take long for the divine vow made to his god to be forsaken. Compliance, even loyalty, could then be guaranteed. Training the entire Patriot army to use these now plentiful and accurately made weapons took time. Secrecy was of the utmost importance. One substantiated rumor to Apepi would certainly bring his entire forces to bear down upon Thebes before they were ready. For a beast can be at its most dangerous once it believes it has lost the upper hand and might soon be pushed against a fortress wall. The prince and his council sat silently introspective. Among them was Ahmose, son of Sekenenra, and nephew to Kamose. He was next in line to lead the Thebans. Each man envisioned the exhilaration of victory, for they all agreed that their warriors were ready. The magic embodied in the weapons of the Asiatics was now their magic too. They died in a state of disbelief, those betrayers of their Kemet ancestors. The sight of horse-drawn war chariots bearing down upon them, killing with Asiatic arrows. Had they been deceived by their god, Apepi? Inscrutability was not slacked by their recognition of the attackers as not being the sundry legions of Avaris, but all men like themselves, dark-skinned natives of Kemet. Those who remained alive as the raging blades of atonement hacked their way toward them could not or would not reconcile the possibility of what was happening. It was in this mindset they fell, joining an ever-growing heap of sundered Kemet and foreign bloody bodies left like butcher's offal to rot in the fly-infested heat of the sun. This scene was repeated again and again as the divine force of the Theban army pushed northward, upon chariot, on foot, and in river-sailing ships, toward what they knew would be the battle decisive. Apepi ordered his remaining legions, along with all loyal minions surrounding Avaris, to report to the fortress city. They would buttress mighty walls never penetrated by an enemy. The standard of Amun went before Kamose and his troops as they approached Avaris. This blessed deity was their focal point, the source of divine strength that gave the Theban commander assurance that the last days of evil domination upon his country were near. However, it quickly became apparent that the army of Avaris would not be drawn out of their city to do battle in the field. If Kamose wanted Apepi, he would have to go in and get him. In that case, the prince would bide his time, attack when he was strongest. A few days' rest for his throng after their exhausting drive north would ensure a cataclysmic pounding that would crumble mighty walls, exposing an Asiatic king subject to the reconciliation of a debt long overdue. Kamose alone would make the final decision as when the attack would take place. He hoped that a constant anticipatory vigil on the part of Avaris would soon make them stress-weary. On the night of the 17th day, unusually dense clouds blocked the illuminating body of Nut, the sky goddess. This was the signal. Under the cover of the starless night, Kamose ordered his warriors, fortified by the magic of the sacred blue lotus, to begin the attack in full force. The thick wall of the city was approached with siege ladders, and its massive gate was pounded with the repeating thrusts of battering rams. It was a clamor designed to startle, causing the bulk of the Avaris forces to move to defend their great primary gate. The yells, groans, and screams of war escalated quickly as more and more troops from both sides made their way to the wall to attack and repel. Few Theban warriors were able to escape the deadly hail of arrows and slashing khopesh of the enemy to successfully scale the wall to do battle inside, but Kemet archers, with shots furious and aim true, managed to increase that number with each passing moment. As the turmoil raged, Kamose set in motion the most decisive aspect of his plan. With relayed signal, the fortress was approached from the rear by a flotilla of 4 large warships powered by synchronized oarsmen, their blades cutting silently into the murky water, gliding the vessels to the base of the mammoth wall that lined the river. 20 experienced black-skinned Theban climbers, each carrying a coil of heavy rope attached to his side, disembarked directly onto the facade. Protected by the inky darkness of that night, they began their perilous climb to the top using near imperceptible cracks in the granite wall. The soldiers waiting below watched motionless, giving silent prayer to Montu, god of war, to keep these brave comrades from falling death. One clinging figure suddenly lost firm grip and plummeted straight as an arrow to disappear soundlessly into the depths. Those men close by perused the spot, waiting patiently for their companion to reappear, then became uneasy when that anticipation continued unfulfilled. At last, a human head broke the water's surface. The climber signaled with raised arm that all was well, before calmly rejoining welcoming warriors. The silence was broken by the distant sound of negligent Avaris archers being overpowered and then dispatched. They had been relatively small in number, assigned to guard what had been assumed to be an unassailable portion of barrier. Within seconds, anchored ropes were dropped to allow Amose and his detachment to rapidly scale the wall to join those bold Thebans awaiting inside. Their attack was swift, too swift for alarm to be sounded. These hundreds of Kemet warriors burn dwellings and slaughter all in their path as they make their way through the city toward its main gate, where Kamose and the bulk of his army continue what has become a seemingly futile struggle to fully conquer that wall. Protected only by divine providence, the commander has managed to valiantly scale the fortification to join his outnumbered infantry ensconced inside. With leonine precision, he cuts down enemy after enemy while anticipating that at any moment relief will come via reinforcements fighting their way from the rear of the fortress. It happened so quickly few noticed. Chest pierced, arrowhead penetrating his shoulder blade, he was gone. Those followers of Kamose who did see fight on through rising grief. The Thebans battling inside the fortress continued to face massacre, while those vast numbers outside maintained their push to fight their way through a relentless, serried mass from which arrows flew and khopesh flailed. Most were flung back to the ground, chopped to death or dying. Was all lost? Where was Amose? He could see it. The ear-flaying clamor of the battle could also be heard, even above the screams of scattering Avaris citizens. The city's great gate would be reached in minutes. As Amose and his detachment approached, the indiscernible mass of warring men became a distinguishable sight of Asiatic warriors cutting down near-quailed soldiers of Thebes. The warriors of Kemet fighting outside perceived that the unbreakable barrier at the top of the wall had begun to relent. Had salvation come? Confidence overcame uncertainty when tens, then hundreds of Thebans were now able to make their way over the wall. The gate was opened. Over 1,000 marched through. The Avaris army was now trapped from in front and behind, yet the battle continued to roar unabated. They refused to surrender. Apepi, along with 2 loyal protectors, broke away from what they knew was a lost cause to make their way unnoticed along the same path, now strewn with motionless bodies and filled with consuming fire, that had brought Amose through the city. At the rear wall, they joined the few surviving citizens in a desperate leap from the top of the structure to the river below. All did not emerge, but Apepi and his 2 defenders were among those that did. Struggling to shore in a state of near-drowned panic, they traveled a short distance east, where they took possession of a small papyrus reed boat and rowed north to Kemet's border. Ra was reborn. His life-giving rays revealed a scene of jubilant celebration among the slaughter. The occupiers of Kemet were no more. Sacred incense rose to caress the blessed nostrils of Amun, its powerful fragrance somewhat masking the growing stench from corpses scattered alone and in piles within and without the walls of dead Avaris. "Where is Apepi?" The question came from the lips of Amose, now leader of not only the Thebans but of all Kemet. Escape for the beast could not be accepted. With rapid preparations, the prince, accompanied by 3 stout charioteers, set off to give chase to the surely northern-bound king of no one. They had sailed to the mouth of the Nile and then made their way on foot toward Canaan. Contact with members of those nomadic shepherd tribes from which their history says they sprang would mean salvation. If not, death in the fatal heat of the Sinai desert would be their fate. Apepi, far from a young man, was soon forced to succumb to the undignified position of being carried on the shoulders of his 2 virile defenders. The 3 labored onward, sharp-eyed and desperately hopeful. What was it? It was not human, but some wild, unidentified monster of the desert, a giant, tentacled creature seeming to roam aimlessly, searching, hungry perhaps, maybe full of magic that could harm or even kill. Horses were halted. Not one of these pursuers had ever crossed the northern boundary of Kemet. What horrors might await had not been considered, and now memory of legend thought myth began to rush into their hearts. Stories of dark forces, deadly creatures like the shape-shifting Salawa that will shred and eat a man, leaving nothing to pass into the glorious afterlife. It was Amose that finally broke free from frozen stillness to pull his chariot forward. Anxiety brought perspiration far beyond that gifted by Ra. Courage fed rising courage, moving those still frozen to fall behind their king. "I see clearly, heart remain brave, Amun protect us." Amose's prayer was answered, for the creature transformed into 3 peregrinating men of the desert. Apepi and his bearers stopped their tread, red faces anguished. They turned to face fast approaching fate. The voices are everywhere. Amose is possessed by them. The unrelenting cries and whispers of Kemet ancestors. They utter one word: revenge. Bearer's futile defenses were quickly overcome. It was only Apepi that remained alive. Trembling resignation bent his knees to kneel before his master with head-bowed obeisance. "Apepi!" Again it is the ancestors who speak. It is Amose's voice that is heard. With his left hand holding the beast by the throat, and his right holding battle-club firmly, the king brought 2 crushing supernal blows down upon the Asiatic's head. Skull split, eyes popped, teeth shattered. Red sand encircled leather-clad feet. Ma'at, powerful once more, had won at last. Apepi's mangled body was brought back to Thebes as a defining symbol of the resurgence of order. Many traveled long distances to view the bloody remains before they were finally removed from Kemet and given to the distant desert to be consumed by its voracious sand. It was time to rebuild and to build anew, not to be conquered, but to conquer. Under Pharaoh Ahmose, Kemet regained that former strength lost so long ago. A new dynasty of Theban kings was founded. Ra, god of the sun, king of gods, in his grateful and generous wisdom, joined with the patron god of Thebes to become one yet remain separate. Thus Amun was reborn as Amun-Ra, the super-powerful patron of Kemet. Led by this war god of the sun, Ahmose and his descendants, with armies invincible, battled to push the borders of their divine influence northward and southward, to make servants of Pharaoh every king of every land, from the state of Naharin on the far side of the Euphrates to the ancient city of Napata, further south into Kush than ever before. Treaty and diplomatic marriage secured Pharaoh's dominance, bringing rich tribute pouring into Kemet no slower than the waters of the life-giving river could carry them. Gold is as plentiful as dust. A great debt is owed to all the gods, but most importantly to Amun-Ra. The god-king's gratitude was nearly unbounded to this crucial patron of Kemet, tribute near equal to that received by Pharaoh himself filled the coffers of the temple of this god. In addition, King Ahmose gave the gift of his wife and cousin Ahmose Nefertari as bride to Amun-Ra, and from this union was born his son and successor, Amenhotep I. All female descendants of blessed Ahmose Nefertari would now and forever hold the title heiress, for they inherited the embodiment of a direct path to legitimate kingship. 6 warrior god-kings have reigned from the time of Ahmose to the present, 2 called Amenhotep, 3 named Thutmose, and 1 wise and powerful female, the divine Hatshepsut. I tell this story, Majesty, not only for your entertainment on the eve of your beloved son's marriage, but as an offering in gratitude for your generous blessings upon our country. May you live forever, Thutmose IV, great god-king, Horus on the throne, lord of Kush, father of Syria, son of Ra, who placed you with his own hands as Pharaoh in Kemet. The king sat silent, staring blankly at the top of the shaved head of the exhausted and now prostrate storyteller. So much history, so much accomplished by those avenging princes of this country, his forefathers. The blood of those warrior kings runs through my body. Yet do I really belong among them, he thought. Finally Thutmose finds his voice. Wonderful, thank you, my blessings upon you. If it was possible to mold himself further into the floor, the storyteller would have, for Pharaoh's praise meant some reward would come his way, perhaps a bit of gold, or could a tiny plot of land be conceivable? Now sleep calls to your king, and he must answer. With undiminished gratitude for a story beautifully told, I give you permission to seek out whatever may beckon you. Again Thutmose fell silent, disappearing into his thoughts, yet maintaining a deceptive face of confidence. Horus on the throne, that is what this teller of stories called me. Horus, sacred embodiment of Pharaoh. Does the falcon god envelop me with his insulating wings? I am king. Any doubts regarding that fact will tomorrow be forever silenced. Thutmose's consciousness returned him to his sleeping chamber to find that he was now alone. He had not noticed the obeisant figure rise and creep out of the dim light of the room to vanish into shadow. His mask of aplomb abandoned his face. He would not call for anyone to undress him. The presence of even one other at that moment would be unbearable. The king knows well why he is so anxious. Anxiety has visited him constantly during his short reign. After tomorrow, after the contract of marriage is sealed, anxiety will end. There will be no more suspicious, disapproving whispers among powerful nobles of the court, At least none that need be worried about. He would be the irrefutable king of the two lands, not only placed on the throne by Ra, but with a first-born son wed to an heiress, wife of the god, direct descendant of the blessed Ahmose Nefertari. Come, sleep, fall upon me in your peaceful incarnation. No dreadful dreams tonight. His couch is comforting, weariness overcomes him. And then, a smell indelible, the hot grass and dusty scent of the southern plains. It invades Thutmose's nostrils. He can see them again, those attacking king of beasts. Their vicious, deafening roar vibrates within his head. A prince mauled, and Thutmose is the only human witness. He stands motionless, unmoved and unafraid, watching for any signs of life. Yet how could there be any? For Thutmose has human blood on his khopesh blade. He attempts to wipe it clean, yet it always reappears. Blood from a young man's throat newly slashed. No lion has made this wound. The sun, its rays folded like arms across his face, mournfully drops from the sky. The long dormant god of chaos emerges. Seth joyfully embraces his servant. He lifts him up with cold, grateful arms. Fear finds Thutmose. Guilt overwhelms him. Looking down from within Seth's tender grip to see again the pitiful and sanguine remains of his brother, Prince Royal, heir apparent. He now longs to detect severed fingers renewed, shredded chest whole and suffused with breath, his slashed throat restored. Ra, in the guise of a whispering sphinx, had promised Thutmose the throne. Uncover me from my prison of sand, and I will make you pharaoh. I heard the words of the god. My brother is dead. An unthinkable, horrible accident. The body of the heir apparent was brought back for sacred burial, prepared by the mortuary god Anubis and his priests of the dead. 70 days of preparation. They must have seen the truth. Thutmose was awake, startled and disturbed by the ineluctable vision. It held him pinned to his couch, staring into soft moonlit darkness. Behind his stare the memory continued. Kneeling over the heir's lion-clawed body, he makes the fatal slice into his throat. The prince opens his eyes. He is horrified. His lungs battle for air but lose to a profusion of blood. Looking at Thutmose, his countenance is flooded with painful entreating. It is his brother's eyes that are emblazoned upon the king's heart. He will never escape them.